Hello. Today I thought I'd do something a bit brave and pull out an SD1. Yes, I'm not joking. That's what I'm going to do today. Underneath this cover here, next to Boris Johnson, is a Rover SD1, which some of you may be already familiar with if you know the channel. Look, you can see just a little clue of the car under there. This car has been here for about 3 months now, and I really struggled to get it off of the truck and to just leave it here. In fact, it took a couple of hours, as I remember, and that's kind of put me off wanting to do anything else with it. But I think the time has come where I'm going to have to yank it out and try and free up the wheels a bit more and actually have a look underneath, because I suspect it may be a bit rotten. If for nothing else today, pulling this out just to get rid of some of this tree would actually come in handy, because when you leave nature to do its thing, but the rest of the country can be full of nature as far as I'm concerned. If I'm paying for this bit of land every week, I want to be able to use it. Just before I attempt to pull this car out, let's have a brief history. Well, I first saw this car about 6 months back, maybe 9 months back, when I went up to one of the top of the hills to a farm up there to go and view it with my mate Craig, and we both decided that it wasn't really worthwhile buying. But that didn't stop somebody else from buying it, so it got bought and it was taken off down to Staffordshire or somewhere like that, where it stayed on a farm. Then after a while, the agreement for the farmland come to an end, and the chap who owns it needed somewhere else for it to go. So I collected it and I brought it here, so it's only a couple of miles from where it first was. And in that barn it stood for 30 years, just covered up with things, to the extent where I believe the car actually got forgotten about. 30 years in a damp barn covered up. That's a recipe for corrosion, and you can certainly see quite a bit just from here, and a few bits missing as well, of course, and I presume the windscreen's got a crack on it, and that tape's there to stop any water from getting inside. So my plan for today is get this pulled out, get those wheels freed up, and put the spare wheel on the back, because that one's completely flat, and then have a look underneath, have a look at the chassis corrosion. If there is any, you never know, it might be completely free of rust altogether. And then open the bonnet up and see if there's any possibility of manually turning over the V8 engine. No time to lose today then, better crack on. The plan is to put the stricken SD1 just there, so I need to move this car. But somehow I don't think there's going to be any major rush. It's probably not going to move that easily. It's not going to move that easily. In fact, I'm not even guaranteeing that I can get this car out. You just never know how stuck it might be. Yep. It wasn't that long ago when I was in this car, actually. I looked in on the 10th of last month just to check that Michael Jackson wasn't living in here. In the early 90s I had an SD1. It was a 2.6 and it was worth nothing at the time, and I really didn't see the appeal, but now I do. From this futuristic retro dashboard and the fashion for green carpets and things like that, and the door pull handle being there, it's quite a cool place for it to be. And these electric window switches just there, I quite like those. But this steering wheel is truly huge, and it's in the way. Just managed to figure out how to get the steering wheel to move up a bit. Still probably a bit too low though. SD1 was considered a terrible car, but now it is just kind of cool, isn't it? But some of the quality of the material here is just, some of this plastic's quite nasty though. It does remind me of cassettes, yeah, like old cassettes, like it's made out of old cassettes, you know, the tapes, audio cassettes. But this is all old, this is all good, this is fine. So they did something right. I'm going to need some help to get this car out, I think. Transitface over there should have the power to yank this from its current spot, wheel seized on or not, but what it hasn't got is the traction, which is why I already know what I'm about to do now to be completely pointless. It's not going to stop me from trying though, because I'm figuring that as the winch cable pulls down on the back, it's going to add extra weight to it. I could put a car on the back, but then I don't think the Transit's got quite enough power to pull without starting to burn the clutch out. Well, look at that. I wasn't really expecting that to happen, but for some reason I managed to get just the right amount of traction to pull this old beast out. As much of a success it was just pulling this out, my plan was to take it over there and do some tinkering with it. So that means I'm going to have to turn it around and stick it over there. I could put it on the back of the truck, but then what if I've got that same problem again, where it just won't push off? I'm going to have to think about this one. Why don't you just think about it before? Why don't you have a plan of action, decide what you was doing before starting the job? That's what I'm telling myself right now. Asking. And now time for the long journey to the other end of the yard. Well, I've decided that this car is not going to come back off the truck without a load of hassle, so I'm going to have to change that wheel first. Yeah, I never get things right, do I? That's got to go on there. The next question is, will the gentle persuader be enough to get that wheel off its hub? Oh, hang on. No, it's not. I think it's the whole hub that's moving. Oh shit. Oh, that's that. Oh, it is, yeah, yeah. It is, the hub. Yeah. Oh, it's... Oh, shit. That's knackered then, isn't it? Yep. There's another knackered item on. bad now. I'm sure you come down from dinner actually, haven't you?
Yeah, of course the other one was flat, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's going to go quite a bit further than that. Well, this is going to be the best opportunity to have a proper good look at this rather sad looking car now. Well, it's definitely a V8. It's definitely been home to some mice as well. Oh, that's not good, is it? That's the air intake. I reckon that would want cleaning out before starting it, don't you? There's a bit of rust here and there.
Just a bit.
That's very optimistic indeed. And if it's fresh, well, it's not that fresh. It's not been there 30 years though, is it?
No.
That's not connected. What is this stuff? It looks like asbestos, doesn't it? Right, it's time to get underneath this car. First thing I'm going to do actually is see if I can manually turn over this engine. $22 good guess. That engine doesn't want to turn over. Try a bigger bar. The trouble is the radiator's in the way, and ideally I could do with the radiator being out of the way to do that, but that might be going a bit too far just for the moment for what I'm doing here. So I might as well just crack on with having a look at the condition of the chassis. Well, you know, on first inspection it doesn't look too bad. That's obviously no good. That's solid. That's not too good. Well, now it's time to have a look on the other side of the other side as well. Now that's not too good. Unfortunately this side's not as good, is it? In fact, I would say that was ruined. I had to come to not the most exciting or positive of conclusions with this car. The chassis rails appear to be actually quite good, just quite crusty. They've been painted up with that black stuff under seal or whatever it was at the time, and they seem to have been reasonably well protected. But the near side sill is rotten all the way along, and there's quite a few crusty bits to address. Plus, both front wings completely shot. All four doors completely useless. The front end's got some sort of knock on there that needs straightening out and re-welding because all the strengthening beam across the front is doing nothing. The windscreen has tape all over it to stop water from getting in through the cracks. Cracks are an MOT failure, but then so's tape across the screen. But does it even need an MOT? Because it is 40 years old. Could I actually put some petrol in this car, put a battery on it, get it started and just insure it and drive it, and that's it, you're legal, no tax, no MOT. But I'm fairly sure you have to have an MOT before you can be MOT exempt. Besides that, try as I might, the engine doesn't seem to want to turn over at the moment. So once you've dealt with the corrosion and the dent on the front and the headlamp that's missing and the front bumper and put four doors on it and two wings and all the rest of the bits in the windscreen and sorted out why the engine doesn't turn over, then of course there'll be the brakes, which will need a full overhaul. New calipers, new discs, new flexi pipes. I would imagine new fuel lines as well. No doubt the fuel pump will have failed as well. Oh, and also it's had mice living in the back and the floor pan in the back's disappearing pretty much. And then at that point where the bodywork's all done and the engine's sorted out and the brakes and the fuel lines and all of the rest of the corrosion and all of the other bits there, then there's things like your fuel pump and your fuel sender and the fuel tank as well. Then what about the electrics? Anything could be going wrong there. Anything could have gone wrong. There's had mice living in there. There could be all sorts of chewed through wires knocking about, and I reckon that could be quite a big job. You ever see one of those documentary programs where you have people that have this budget and they want to make their dream house, and the documentary follows them in their progress, and there's always these hiccups and suddenly it's going to cost another £10,000 or something like that? That's how I imagine this car will be. What do you reckon? Who would like to hazard a guess on the full restoration cost of this car? That's what the comments are for. I haven't given up on the car. I just don't think it's necessarily worthwhile spending the amount of money on it that it needs. But also the engine, I haven't given up on that either. And at some point, I'm going to do another episode of this. And tomorrow, I'm just going to fill the balls up with diesel to try and lubricate the bottom end of the engine. Thank you.